Hi, I'm Gigi, an ex-Amazon bar raiser here at Day One Careers. This video is one of a series that we're putting together so you can hear from current Amazonians about their journey to Amazon and their interview experience. Obviously, this channel is packed with our advice and best practices, but as I've explained many times, the Amazon interview process isn't completely homogeneous. People have varied experiences and approaches. So, we've been talking to current Amazonians to get their stories. Now, just one thing I will say is that some of the strategies deployed by the people that I interviewed wouldn't necessarily be strategies that we'd advise, but it worked for them. So I'm sharing them with you and you can draw your own conclusions. I hope you enjoy meeting them as much as I did.
So, hey, Mandy, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Gigi. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I got to start with, honestly, thank you so much for taking the time out of your Saturday. It's Saturday. You kind of
Yes.
late evening. Where are you exactly? Actually, I don't know.
I'm currently in India, so it is 7:20 p.m.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Well, thank you for giving me your Saturday night. I mean, cool, living it up, spending Saturday night
No,
talking to me.
thank you so much. No, I appreciate being here with you. So thank you for the opportunity.
Amazing. So we're just going to have a chat basically because I know that you're a relatively recent joiner to Amazon, and we'll talk through all of that in a minute. And of course, you've also been following kind of the Amazon interview whiz, which has then obviously recently morphed into Day One Careers for a while. So we've got a little bit of a history together, which is super cool, and it's fantastic to see you on the other side through your journey.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to chat through your journey. So tell me, where were you before? What brought you to Amazon?
So I worked in multiple sectors. I worked in the healthcare sector, then I worked in the finance sector, and I had essentially taken a career break. Part of it, which was voluntary, because I wanted to be with my family. I hadn't seen them in 5.5 years since I was in the US,
Nice.
and part of it was then driven by the pandemic that all of us faced in 2020. So my background essentially is I'm an engineer by education. I did a double master's in the US, and I've primarily worked as a business process consultant and also as a product manager. And that's when I decided that I wanted to start interviewing for big tech firms to be able to do more quality work. So I was focused on quality. And the interesting thing is that when I had the Amazon offer, I had offers from Netflix and also from Wayfair. But the leadership principles at Amazon is actually what drew me to them. Sounds like a cliche now that I'm an Amazonian. However, that is the truth of the matter. And, we'll talk more about my story, but I think that will validate the fact that what I'm saying is actually true and not because I'm an Amazonian. So,
Yeah,
yes.
for sure. And just for the sake of everyone that's watching, tell us what is your role at Amazon? What team do you work in? What's your job function?
Sure. So I am part of the last mile and quality analytics team, which is also referred to as the LMAQ team. And I'm currently in the role of a program manager there, where my goal is to be able to build programs and solve the pain points for, the delivery partners that we have, the drivers, and also basically the DSPs, who are individuals who make sure that all of our products get into the van and then get delivered to us. Given the magnanimity of the packages that Amazon delivers on an everyday basis across the globe, it is very important that we make sure that we are serving our delivery assistants, our delivery partners with the right impact, or with the right resources so that they are comfortable on their routes, right? So that is the program that I am working on. And I am working primarily with 6 intake feedback mechanisms to be able to evaluate the kind of data that comes there, and then build solutions for them.
Okay, awesome. Sounds incredible. And actually, I was interviewing someone from Ops last week, I think, and I don't know whether I've released that one by the time I release this one, but he
Right.
was talking to me about something like, I might remember this wrong, like 1 million packages going through a single one
Yes.
of a single FC in a day.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So he's absolutely correct when he says that, and just when we are customers, in fact, if even if you're not on the LMAQ team at Amazon, right, you may not know the number of packages that are going through, because if someone's working on Alexa or Prime, those segments are very different, right? But it is when you are, say, at the middle mile or the last mile, the teams that we work on, we have that first-hand experience of being able to understand the kind of packages that actually go out every day. And when you're only an Amazon customer, it's you go at the click of a button, the product order gets placed, and because you're a Prime member, you're going to get it in 2 days.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it all
yes,
seems so easy. As a customer,
yes,
you're spoiled because you just press the button.
yes,
You expect that it'll be here 2 days. And if it's like
yes.
day 2, 1 hour, you're like, oh, where's my
Oh,
package? It's
yes,
outrageous.
yes,
And there's
absolutely.
so much that goes on behind the scenes to
Yes,
make that
yes,
possible. It's mad.
absolutely.
So then let's have a chat about, you decided that you wanted to go and work at big tech, and you mentioned that you had offers for Wayfair and Netflix and obviously Amazon, and I'm sure you applied to a few others. So why don't you, if you wouldn't mind, I've been asking everybody to just tell me about their preparation process. Everyone has very different preparation processes. Some I have found a little surprising. Some I think have been a bit more standard. So
Right.
share with me, like, how did you go about, you don't have to tell me minutiae detail, but how did you go about preparing? Kind of, where did you go for resources? What did you prioritize? Talk us through
Sure.
that.
Sure, absolutely. So let me start with this, that, of course, I was leveraging LinkedIn, right? And I happen to have networked with someone who works for Amazon in Bangalore, in India. I didn't know this gentleman, and he had worked for 4.5 years, then taken a 6 months break, and then come back. So he was a boomerang candidate, as we'd call it. And so he came back, and when I got my interview invite, I just reached out to him just to get some input. And I categorically remember him saying this, that Mandakini, if you treat the Amazon behavioral interview just as a behavioral interview for any other organization, you will not clear it. And that stuck with me because I wasn't sure what he was referring to. I didn't even know what he meant, right? So I asked him to just share a few more details with me, and he did. And that one sentence essentially became the pillar because of which I prepared the way I did. And then, of course, I went online and I identified what sources were there. And uh, I don't remember how I stumbled upon your YouTube page. I wish I remembered that. I'd be happy to share it, but I really don't. But I did.
Yeah.
And that was my next stop. I made sure to watch the entire playlist you have for Amazon interviews.
It's
Uh,
it's a good thing you're not watching it now, because it's about 3 times as long as it was like a year and a half ago.
Perhaps I should go back and see, what more I should be learning. And I did that, and I began to make notes as to not just what the leadership principles said. So it wasn't just about customer obsession, or it wasn't just about our right a lot, but it was about, okay, what is the interviewer going to want to hear from me? And then what I did is I went back to my resume and I picked up each bullet point on my resume and started building scenarios out of that in the STAR method.
Mm.
Because what was going to happen is that I was sure that I wanted to take into account how many scenarios I needed to have so that I wouldn't repeat. And I remember a video of yours which categorically said, if you're going to repeat a scenario, take permission. Because during the debrief, you don't want to be in a situation where the interviewers, may wonder that I, as an interviewee, perhaps didn't have the depth of knowledge, and therefore I repeated a scenario, right? Uh, so I said, okay, if I move to the loop and I have two phone screens, which means a total of 7 individuals, even if I have to talk them through 3 scenarios each, which is that with a buffer, I need to have 25 scenarios prepared. And therefore, I picked up one bullet point each from my resume because, if I'm talking that I improved the customer satisfaction score by 70%, it just wasn't improving the customer satisfaction score. There would have been, from beginning to end interactions with various teams, situations where I would have had to take ownership, situations where I would have had to, where I would have had disagreements with people, right? So out of one impact, one piece of the impact that I made on my resume, which was literally one sentence or one bullet on my resume, I was able to extract, if not more, about a minimum of about 2 scenarios. And I went in the reverse order. I don't know why I did this, but I just did, and it worked. It works even today. So instead of saying that I'm going to pick up having backbone, disagree, and commit, and write 3 scenarios about that, I just wrote every scenario possible. So at the end of it, before I got into my loop, I had 32.
Whoa, that's
Yes.
a lot.
So I was categoric about one thing, that I did not at all repeat any situation. I was almost to the point where I had to, but then I said, no, let me see what else exists out there.
Right.
And so I wrote 32, and then I mapped them.
Right.
I didn't do the other way around, but I did this. I did do this, which worked for me because there were, there are like 4 or 5 leadership principles which will work in every scenario, whether it's customer obsession, ownership, bias for action, insist on the highest standards, and so they were like common across the board, right? So that is how I prepared, and not in the interest of wanting to scare anyone, but I say this, that the Amazon behavioral interview, preparation needs a lot of. I think, let me take that back. It needs focused preparation.
Yeah.
It could be 4 hours. It could be 6 hours for someone. It could just be 2 hours for someone, right? But it needs that focused input. We cannot go into the interview expecting that the interviewer is going to ask us a question and we'll say, okay, the situation was this and this is what I did, and in a minute I'm done. The expectation is for us to answer in the STAR method, so we've got to be prepared accordingly, right? And that's what I did. So the interview prep material was your YouTube channel, and
don't name check anyone else. I'll bleep it out.
It was purely your interview channel.
Oh my!
And there was one more. But I primarily just picked up questions from there about, like, very basic, tell me about yourself, so on and so forth, but not really the meat and potatoes of what the interview needed.
I really, really like your tip about starting from your resume, because I think sometimes your resume is a marketing document to get you through the front door and get you to interview. This is true. But I think sometimes at that point, people just kind of abandon it. Whereas what I think you've done, which I think is really smart, is you've used it as your memory structure.
Yes.
Those achievements got you through the front door into interview. So why wouldn't you pick out those achievements and turn them into the stories that you tell at interview? I think that's a really smart tip. I like that.
Because see, when there's a follow-up, right? Because and I remember this was my bar raiser round, where I was asked one question only. So in a 1-hour interview, it was just that one question, and we continued to literally, the bar raiser was peeling the onion and asking me, and we were digging and digging deep, right? Because I had picked up the stories from my resume, I could keep going because that was work that I had done. So that's where I found merit in using this methodology.
Yeah.
Also, it was driven by the fact that if I would have just started building my stories by myself, I may not have got to 32. And
32 is a massive number. I don't think I've ever met anyone who had that
I
many
anyways
stories.
needed 25 if I didn't
Yeah.
want to repeat any.
Yeah.
Given that there will be 5 interviewers at the loop and a minimum of 2 phone screens.
Yeah.
So, just at the bare minimum, I would have needed 21, but like keeping a buffer of 25. So those many I would have needed any which way.
And how did you remember? We're going off script now. I warned you I would
Yes.
end up going off script and you
Yes,
would say something
absolutely.
that piqued my interest. How did you remember the details of 32? Because this is also a question I get regularly about, can I use
Yes.
notes? How am I going to remember my data points? So 32 stories. How, in the Lord's name, did you remember all of the details you needed for 32 stories?
Sure. So I'll start with that. I had my phone screen on February 16th, of which I was informed about a week prior.
Mm.
So what I did is I prepared 5 scenarios for that first phone screen
Right.
because I wouldn't have needed more than 5. So one I prepared where it was about a failure. One I prepared for having backbone, disagree, and commit because I knew that there would be a question about that. And 3 were generic, covering the rest of our leadership principles.
Mm.
And then what I did is I just made like a sheet of paper where I wrote in my own handwriting the 5 scenarios and what the data points for the results were. Because essentially, the data points are needed in the result. In our situation, task, and action, we can be theoretical. But our result, we must end with numbers to showcase that the situation we started with, we ended with this result. Right? So once that was done, right, I then, for that 1 week, I leveraged a psychological concept of repetition, that I would continue to read those 5 scenarios every day at an interval of every few hours.
Got it. Very methodological.
And then on the day of the interview, I was very clear as to what the results for 5 were. So I just want to add one thing here, Gigi, if you allow me, is that a lot of people, when they start the Amazon interview prep process, because of lack of information out there, everyone goes in thinking that it's going to be very casual, without realizing that this is what the interview will entail. It is not an interview like, when I interviewed at 11 other organizations while I was interviewing at Amazon.
Wow.
But and the difference was that over there, when I was asked a question, which was behavioral, it was by the way. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how other organizations focus or work. Our entire focus is this. This is it for us. No one's asking me to code, right? So when this is it for me, then this is it. I've got to prepare like that.
Yeah.
And so then at the end of the phone screen, I knew which scenarios I had used. So now I was not going to prepare those for the loop.
Right.
And I'll be honest with you, I was almost convinced I was not going to make it through, because my phone screen lasted all of 22 minutes. And for some reason, I felt that, okay, could be the interviewer was looking for someone who had more supply chain knowledge or, experience. So I was convinced that I'm not making it through, and I was done. But 48 hours later, I get the email about going to the loop, and there was no other phone screen. So now there were 5 people for the loop. So preparing 3 scenarios each, then it was 15 scenarios, and my loops were scheduled on March 10th and 11th. So between my phone and my loop, I had about 3 weeks.
That's quite a lot of time, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I was back to reading. And in my head, being very aware that, okay, there are few of these leadership principles which stand out and cannot be clubbed with something else.
Right.
So if I am talking about having backbone, disagree, and commit, it cannot be I cannot be giving that scenario for a question where I know that the obvious leadership principle is ownership. There's no point in mixing it because, some of our scenario pieces are very specific to certain leadership principles.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the mental model I built. And I would continue reading the scenarios almost to the point that I could speak them in my sleep. And that was a choice I made. I'm not, when this releases, I don't want people to think that, oh my God, this is how tough it is. Uh, my point is that I made this choice because as I continue to study the leadership principles, I realized that they fell in line with the value system that I follow in my own life.
Mm.
So I was very clear that I need to crack the interview. Whether I take up the offer or not, I couldn't determine that as to where I was. But
Yeah.
I was clear that I need to crack this because Amazon's leadership principles and my value systems fall in line.
Yeah, and I think again, this slightly off topic, but I think that's the crazy thing about the Amazon leadership principles is once you're in them and you're living them every day, you start to
Yes.
realize that they're not really work constrained
Yes.
principles, they're
Yes.
life principles.
I
And
agree with you.
so, I mean, crazy things like, and I'm sure you do this as well, things like taking ownership. Well, that's about taking responsibility and
Yes.
accountability. I often
Yes.
find myself saying to my children, you need to take some ownership of this situation.
If I look at, of course, when I interviewed, we had 14 leadership principles. Today we have 16, right? But even in those 14, right, when we look at our right a lot, which uh, focuses on the fact that, okay, as leaders, our role is that we have to be right more often than not because our decisions impact what people are doing. But we are also human, so we can fail. And uh, I help a lot of people just understand the leadership principles now, and I tell them that it is okay to own your failure because
Mm,
no one is superhuman. And I think that's the same thing goes for life because we will have failures in life and we have to learn from them to make sure that we don't repeat that pattern.
yeah, absolutely.
So, if someone is clear that they want to understand what is happening at Amazon and what Amazon does with their leadership principles, I urge those people to map those leadership principles with their life today. And uh, I can guarantee this that more than 90% of the people, if they do it honestly, they will realize that they're already living those leadership principles.
I actually have a saying, which is that you're probably Amazonians are born Amazonians. They just aren't paid yet. And I think that's, you are born
But
an Amazonian.
I think that's true. I think that's true
Yeah.
because because the rigor we go through to prepare for the interview, and then the pride that we take in being Amazonians is I've not seen that kind of pride in the eyes of a lot of other people. I don't want to name organizations, but uh, we have a different kind of pride. And I would see just before I was going to interview, I would see people say that this is how proud we are, we've got our orange badge, now we've got our red badge, and I'm like, what is going on? And people are talking about phone tool icons, and but the fact of the matter remains, well, when you get in, there is just so much to do. It is a world of its own.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think on one of my lives I did on Monday, someone was trying to ask me, why is there so much focus on these leadership principles? What about, caring about people who are, the followers, the employees? And I was saying, no, you've misunderstood what leadership principles are. It's not management principles. It's how and then I used the analogy of religion. It's like the 10 commandments or the pillars of Islam. It's a guidance about how Amazon wants its people to live their lives. And then I was thinking, do you know what? That analogy of religion isn't quite so far off as
Yes.
I thought when I started, because like you say, there's there's just things that are very Amazonian, like the traditions of badges and the traditions of stickers and the traditions of phone tools that are very
Yes,
almost, well, they're cultural, dare I say the
yes,
word. Yeah,
yes. And
it's
and I, and I remember, to the point of phone tool, I remember this was just last week. I think it was either Tuesday or Wednesday, and someone had shared that they've started a new role, and someone at a director level and above. And the person said, "I wanted to look up a few people on my, business unit." And I said, "Okay, now where do I look them up? Because I don't have a phone tool, so I don't know who's who." So
Actually, do you know, we need to explain to everyone what phone tool is, because I've just realized I'm going to know. So,
I'll leave it to you. Please go ahead.
yeah, so phone tool is essentially, there's an internal directory, and I think most organizations have internal directories that you can look people's names up. And then in this directory, what you can get when you do a certain project or a part of a certain team is something called a phone tool can be created that you can download and put onto your profile on the directory. So they're effectively virtual stickers. So I'm sure
Yes.
lots of people will look at LinkedIn and will see loads of Amazonians posting pictures of their laptops with stickers on them.
Yes.
There's a
Yes.
virtual equivalent, which is a phone tool, which is effectively a sticker on your directory. And they are much coveted. Like, people literally set themselves goals to get to X many phone
Yes.
tools. It's funny.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it also, this whole virtual sticker concept also goes to show that we are raising the bar within ourselves.
Yeah.
And I remember, you, of course, when it was Interview Whiz, right, talking about the concept of being a bar raiser, and that is when it stuck in my head, and that is one of my goals. So what I also feel is, just having this kind of environment that is built, which pushes us. So no one is pushing me. Essentially, the manager is not going to tell me to do something, or my skip level manager is not going to tell me to do something, but because I see it in my environment, I push myself to be better.
Mm. And it's
So
about
we
the
live that way.
hunger. And I think that goes back to your preparation and your level of preparation for the internet in the process, right? You were
Yes,
so hungry for it.
yes,
You
I was.
pushed yourself and invested the time and put some real intellectual thought and strategic ambition behind your approach to the interview process. And
Yes.
like I say, I've spoken to a few people, and lots of very, very different approaches to the preparation process. Yours is very similar to mine, actually. I got to your level of repetition and detail and number of examples, whereas I know other people are perhaps a little less kind of, I won't say
Right.
focused because that's not fair, but they structure their approach a bit differently. So now you're program
Yes.
manager in an awesome, crazy busy part of the business. One of the other things that I would love to hear from you is your thoughts on what are the most important leadership principles in your particular role. There are obviously important leadership principles that are universal. Customer obsession is always universal, deliver results is always universal, but from a program manager point of view, what would you say, based on your experience, would be the most important leadership principles that if someone was applying for a program manager role, that they should be focusing on?
Sure. Uh, so I will not generalize it to all program manager roles,
Okay.
because the leadership principles for each PM role could be very dependent for the team that we are working on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in my team, in my case, my customer is not internal to Amazon. My customer is external to Amazon. However, every individual who places an order on Amazon's website is serviced by my customers. So, customer obsession for me is vital. So, while in my role, I may want to do multiple other things, which I have the opportunity to do, I have to be able to learn to tie it back to how it is going to solve the customer's pain point. So, two very, very vital leadership principles for my role on the LMAQ team are customer obsession and earning trust. Very, very vital.
Mm.
And so, this is from an external customer perspective. And when I look at it within Amazon itself, because we have to work a lot with the tech teams and we have to influence the tech teams. So with them, it is about having backbone, disagree, and commit. Because tech always will have that, okay, this is our goal for this year, right? And again, using an Amazonian term, which is OP1, so they will say, this is our operational planning for this year. And I will go back to them and say, okay, I agree with that. However, this is a problem my customer is facing and I need you to resolve it. So how do we get to that point where you may not have something in your goal, but I need a resolution built?
I think you make a really good kind of point there, where when people are looking to work out the key leadership principles for their roles to prepare, I always tell people to go through the job description and try and match the words that you're reading to the leadership principle. But there's one leadership principle that you can never find in a job description, and that's have backbone, disagree, and commit, because no one's going to write that in a job description.
even on trust, Gigi, on trust is not vocal. However, it's essential to everyday working. I have to earn the trust of my manager. I have to earn the trust of my peers. I have to earn the trust of my customer. I have to earn the trust of my fellow Amazonians, because we work together to build a solution which in the end not only services our customer, but in the end will come back to say, okay, this is what Amazon did. And somewhere you've been a part of that piece of news that this is what Amazon did.
Yeah, and I think you're right in terms of earned trust is so critical. And in my experience as a bar raiser, there's nothing that will get a candidate not inclined faster than a red flag on earned trust.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
You're absolutely right. So how long have you been in Amazon now? Remind me.
I finished one quarter.
Done a quarter, right.
However, I tell people that I think I was an Amazonian from the outside before I actually got my alias, because I had an offer, as you know, last year in April. Immigration, the second COVID wave and everything. So I've changed 3 teams, 2 continents. By the time then I actually, and the reason I share this with people is because this is how much I believe in the value system. I could have easily said that, okay, I'm just going to take up another role in India, work and figure out whatever happens. But it just so happened that I just didn't do that.
Yeah, you really wanted it. There's no question, though. You really wanted it.
I was very clear. And amongst all of my trials and tribulations, my biggest advantage have been that it allowed me to connect with so many people at Amazon who taught me the concept of a bar raiser, who taught me the concept of, promotions. So when I got into my role, I was clear. I am looking for this in the first quarter, this in the second quarter, this after 1 year, this after 2 years. And my manager almost looked at me and said, okay, do you want to be where I am? So I said, no, I don't want your role, but this is what I want to do. So yeah, for anything in life, you've got to want it to get it.
It's true. And so it sounds like you did brilliantly in terms of getting in touch with people on LinkedIn. You got lots of insider information from the outside. I love asking this question. You sound like you were very prepared for what you were going to face. Was there anything that really surprised you then once you actually landed in your role that perhaps you weren't expecting, or you weren't expecting to the degree that you got it?
So nothing negative. What absolutely took me by surprise is the ecosystem we have built at Amazon.
Okay.
What I'm alluding to is that we, instead of going to Word as the first, say, point of writing anything, we'll open a Quip.
Oh, Quip. I hate Quip.
Right. So what I'm saying is that whether we love it or we hate it, the point is that, and I tell people this, that when you get into Amazon, the world is very different. So while I had a lot of inside information from the outside, there was no way I could have fathomed what I was going to see on the inside.
Mm.
Just the magnanimity of the operation. And I'm not
Yeah.
speaking from the perspective of the team that I'm on. The amount of data that is available, the amount we write. I think one of the things that took me by surprise is how much of our everyday work is writing.
Yeah.
How much of our everyday work is writing, because one interesting thing on that point of writing. So one thing I noticed in my initial meetings was, okay, the meeting has started, but everyone is silent. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? Why is no one saying anything? And then I realized that
Did nobody warn you?
that everyone is reviewing a document.
Yeah.
So the first 15 to 20 minutes of the meeting is doc review.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm like, and it happened with me twice. And this was like literally in the first 48 hours, because there were some overseas meetings that were scheduled. So my manager said, just attend it. And I'm wondering, am I on the right meeting? What? And then someone does a time check. Then someone says, we need a little more time. Someone says, okay, we are good to start. And I feel that that's a very inclusive process. Everyone is reading the same document, irrespective of the fact that you're a director, you are a senior manager, you are a program manager. It doesn't matter. And everyone has an equal opportunity to ask questions or get details if you don't understand something.
Yeah, you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And when I think back to access to information, to your point about the kind of egalitarianism associated with access to information, I don't think I had the same access to the same type of information in my previous company as my VP did. Whereas you're right, in Amazon, there's nothing that my VP knew about a particular subject that I couldn't also know, either by reading a wiki, reading a document, going into the actual Tableau tool myself.
Exactly. Or getting a query from someone running it on Hubble, anything. It's an open organization.
Yeah, I that's a really good point. Actually, I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective, but it's incredibly egalitarian when it comes to access to information. You're right.
Yes.
You're absolutely right. So, before we wrap up, I have one final question for you, which is, what advice, if you only could give candidates out there one piece of advice, and you've given them loads of amazing tips and information already, but if you were going to just pick one thing to say to them, what would it be?
To prepare for the interview?
Prepare. Spend some time on it.
Yeah. So my one piece of advice, if you are going into an Amazon interview, is understand why you want to interview for Amazon.
That's interesting. And why did you say that? Do you say that because you think that their interviewer is going to ask them and it's going to matter a lot to the interviewer? Or are you saying that because you need to know what your motivation is to then invest the time?
I'm not saying it because the interviewer will ask it. I'm saying it because if anyone who has an opportunity to interview at Amazon, if they know why Amazon, then the preparation becomes that much simpler.
Yeah. Putting in the amount of effort that you have to put in is a lot easier when you are committed. You understand why you're putting yourself through that.
Right.
Oh, I made it sound really bad, didn't I? Why are you putting yourself through that?
It's absolutely correct, because it requires focused effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, That's it. Thank you so much for your time. I know you were on such an incredibly challenging journey, and I've been so impressed with your tenacity. We've connected, as you say, a few times
Yes.
in LinkedIn. I watched you kind of go through your interview process, and then there was the immigration wobble, and then I spotted
Yes.
quite a few months later, that you'd actually landed in Amazon, and you were commenting on my LinkedIn stuff. So it's
Yes.
always a real thrill for me to see the journey that people go through, and I really appreciate you coming back and
Thank you.
sharing it
Thank you
with
so
everyone on
much.
the channel.
Thank you so much. The honor and pleasure has been all mine. Thank you.
Top. I'll see you on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, I suppose.
You too. You too. Have a wonderful time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Now, what you need to do is click the link here to claim your free Day One Careers Customer Obsession Taster course. Watch that and you'll nail every customer obsession question asked of you in your Amazon interview. Or if you want to do that a little bit later, why don't you check out more here of our incredible insights and advice on Amazon interview preparation.